Hi, I'm Ryan,
I'm Dylan.
and welcome to the bonus episode. Our first bonus episode of Adaptation Station, the bonus Halloween episode,
Halloween special. Wow.
where the show where we review books and the movie adaptations. One of us reads the book before watching the movie. The other watches the movie and then reads the book, and we give you the recommendation, our recommendations for which order gives you the best experience.
Yes, and for today's very special Halloween bonus episode, we have a little bit of a spooky story for you. We are talking about Ring by Koji Suzuki and the movies associated with that.
Yeah, and this was actually a fan suggestion. Our very first, well, if we call it a fan, our very first commenter.
Yeah. Huge shout out to Carlos Fontes, who commented this recommendation under our Under the Skin episode.
Yeah.
He said, "Oh, you should read this book by Japanese author Koji Suzuki." And then watch the famous Ring movie.
Yeah, and he specifically mentioned the Japanese movie, the Japanese film, which was Ring, and I did look up, it was released in North America. The Japanese film was released in North America as Ringu.
Ringu.
So that's why we were looking up and seeing a title discrepancy, a discrepancy, whether the title of that was Ring or Ringu, and that's why.
And the American remake is called The Ring.
Right? Yeah. And that also leads to the reason we did this as a bonus episode, is because we had both previously watched The Ring, the American film, so we couldn't really do this one justice and give it our exact or our appropriate ratings as of doing them in different orders.
As a brand new thing, that's true. Yeah. So for this episode, I read the book first and then watched the movie. But of course, I saw the Japanese movie. Yeah, I saw the American movie first back in the day. So then I read the Japanese book before watching the Japanese movie, and Ryan did the other way around for the Japanese ones.
Yeah. So you want to kick it off with the book?
Yeah, I read first. So here is a little bit about the book. Ring was originally published by Koji Suzuki in the Japanese language in 1991. It was translated into English in 2004 by Robert Romer and Glenn Wally.
So after the American
movie
came out.
Yeah, which we'll get to talking about that. Yeah, 2 years after the American movie was made, they translated the novel into English. So what's the scenario of the book? After 4 teenagers mysteriously die of a sudden heart failure at the exact same day and time, journalist Kazuyuki Asakawa can't help himself from connecting the dots and pursuing an answer to explain this horrific event. He doesn't imagine that this mystery might even put his own life on the line. So that is Ring, and currently the book on Goodreads has a score of 3.81 out of 5 stars, or on our scale, that is a 7.62 out of 10.
All right. And the book was made into a Japanese film in 1998, directed by Hideo Nakata, starring Nanako Matsushima as Reiko Asakawa. We'll get into that as a difference. Yeah. Miki Nakatani as Mai Takano. Hiroyuki Sanada as Ryuji Takayama. Yeah.
Big fan.
Yeah. Rie Ino as Sadako Yamamura. And Yuko Takeuchi as Tomoko Oishi. And as far as the synopsis, it's a similar synopsis to the book, obviously. They didn't deviate to an extreme extent from the premise at all. And currently on Rotten Tomatoes, Ring, the movie, has a 97% with the critics.
Wow.
And an 81% with the audience. So also very high.
Very good. Wow.
And that's mainly what we're doing this episode on, is that combo, the book and then the Japanese movie. We're going to talk about the American movie. I don't have a lot of information on that other than it is essentially a remake of the Japanese movie.
Yeah, very important.
And it in 2002, directed by Gore Verbinski, starring Naomi Watts, and it currently has a 71% with the critics, and 48% with the audience.
Really?
Yeah, which is surprising to me. That that's so low, honestly.
Yeah, I thought that was a pretty huge movie
kind of
in the U.S.
Yeah.
Like a kind of a, I don't know, it seemed like a landmark horror movie at the time, like pretty iconic.
Yeah. So you want to go for our scores?
Yeah,
here?
let's give our scores before we start talking about it too much. So I read the book first by Koji Suzuki, and I gave it an 8.9 out of 10.
Wow, that's very high.
Ooh, yeah, I love the book. And then I watched the Japanese movie. I gave that a 6.4 out of 10.
Okay. Do you have, I know we're not really rating it, but do you have a rating for the American movie?
I liked the American movie a little bit more than the Japanese movie, actually.
Okay.
I would probably give it like a 6.8.
6.8, okay. So yeah, I watched the Japanese movie first, and I gave that a 5.9.
Okay.
So and then I read the book and I gave the book a 7.5.
Okay.
And then the American movie I give a 6.9.
Oh.
Kind of right in between, very close to yours.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. So here's the part where we kind of get into some more of the spoilers surrounding these three. If you care about any of that, I'd be almost surprised at this point for anybody at least our age who hasn't seen the American movie The Ring. It seems very popular, especially of the time, our age. I was 12 when it came out, and
I was 6. Is that right? 8.
Yeah,
that doesn't matter.
So it was a phenomenon kind of at the time. It was very creepy, and the whole 7 days. Thing.
Yeah, I felt traumatized when I first watched it. I was way too young.
But if you haven't seen any of that, or you don't want any specifics from the book, maybe spoiled, we'll give you the time code. You can skip to the end, skip the reviews, and we'll give you our recommendations there at the end.
Yeah.
So
let's get into spoilers. Where do you want to start? We have 3 things to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we talk, just a little intro about like the movie, the American movie, because that's where we started. We started with that. We saw it probably. I seem to recall watching it when it was new, when it came out.
Yeah.
And very creepy, like very scary, not just creepy, like frightening.
Yeah,
like nightmare, horrifying. Like and really the big thing that I had remembered from it from that time was the video itself.
The video itself just is the images
very
on it.
disturbing.
Yeah.
That made the whole thing like super creepy. Obviously, her crawling out of the TV at the end is also a scary thing. If you know it's coming, it's not as scary. We just rewatched it last night. To get a little bit more of a little recent take on it.
Have it fresh after reading and watching the originals,
right,
too.
Yeah. And my impression was that I didn't like it as much as I remembered liking it. And besides the creepy part, like kind of at the beginning of it mostly, it's a little slow. It becomes less of a horror and actually kind of more of a mystery type of thing also.
That's why I like it better than the Japanese movie, is because the book is more of a mystery.
Yeah.
So it's not like accurate to all the details that happen in the book, but the American movie does feel more of like a similar style, like of the mystery, and the videotape is better in the American movie, I think. It's a lot shorter in the Japanese one. It only has a few images and the clues are too easy, I felt like.
Oh, yeah.
So that it doesn't become the long mystery that the American one is.
The American one, it almost is like they have the clues there, but they don't follow them as much as...
That's true. They just kind of see them.
They kind of see them, and they
around.
find the missing the lighthouse that's like off the edge. She has to do the crazy tracking to find the lighthouse, and that's the big thing, I think, is the lighthouse. And then they end up just seeing all these other things. They happen upon them, like the ladder or
she just sees it.
or the mirror.
The mirror in the house.
Yeah, so she just ends up seeing these things later. And so that's the thing about the American movie. There's a lot more of the supernatural. Well, who all else has supernatural powers in this movie? Because her son in that has like psychic powers to some extent.
Yeah.
And that's the son thing is almost something that has like it has grown from the book. From the book, he's just like there's a son in there, and he's just like a baby, right?
Yeah, it's a baby.
It's a baby, and then in the Japanese film, there's a kid, but that's basically it. He's just a kid.
Yeah.
And he's there, and he's also sees the movie. That's the thing throughout all of them.
Yeah, but that's just like a twist from the book. Like, oh no, my son watched the movie.
Yeah. And then in the American one, he becomes even more of a character of where he's not really involved in the mystery. He's kind of there on the side, but he's just this weird, creepy kid.
Yeah. That seems like rewatching it like a cheesy American horror movie trope where the kid's doing the creepy drawings and he says like, you're going to die. Or
he calls his mom by her first name.
Oh yeah. Rachel. Yeah. Weird stuff like that. Rewatching it, like you said, I was surprised how I didn't seem to like it as much as before, thinking it was so good. And then it seems to have some parts that are like, she's been dead for 10 years. Like...
Yeah, in Friends,
Yeah, Susie's been dead for 10 years. There's a few cheesy parts that kind of take me out of it.
But even having those parts, one of my thoughts after actually watching the Japanese film was, I think in terms of filmmaking and storytelling around like movies and stuff, I think that the U.S. version stands up better over time than the Japanese one. The Japanese one seems very old as far as a movie goes, and it seems a little dull to me in that way. It's like not exciting at all.
I can see that.
But then again, I think that my ratings of both the book and the Japanese movie were influenced by the fact that I knew the story, even just the general basis of the story from having seen the U.S. movie.
That's true, huh? So you can't be
as
on
a
your
kid. So that's why it's a bonus episode, and I think that both of those ratings are lower because of that. Like I might have rated them higher if I hadn't known, anything about them.
Yeah. That's a really good point. One thing that I thought was interesting is I liked the scene in the Japanese movie when Sadako crawls out of the TV.
I did. That's one thing I wrote down is like, and when she crawls out of the TV in the Japanese movie is by far the best part of that movie is what I wrote down.
And it's not from the book. That was original for the Japanese movie. So I see why they took that for the American movie because it's the iconic
part. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like you could see better in the Japanese movie that she doesn't have the fingernails when she's like crawling across the floor.
Yeah, I didn't even look for that when we watched the US version last night. I didn't look for it. It did have one spot when she crawled out with her hands her skin's all like water bloated and it's a close up of her hand kind of, and she probably didn't have fingernails.
Yeah.
But I didn't look for it.
It's not as obvious to see as like in the Japanese movie. I was like, oh, that looks cool. Which is interesting because in the American movie, they have even one of the images in the tape is the nail going through the finger and pushing up the nail. Yeah. And she finds the fingernail in the well and everything. I liked the well scene. a lot in the book. The best in the book. It's just like the moment when he finds the skull and then like she dissolves around it or whatever. And then Ryuji's up there and he's like, oh, the deadline passed. We're saved.
Yeah.
I thought that was really great in the book and pretty good in both of the movies. It's like a good scene. Mm-hmm. I feel they went a little crazy with that in the American movie. I feel like when she gets hit by the TV and like thrown down the well and everything.
I actually had forgotten that.
I wasn't expecting that on the rewatch.
Completely. I was like, oh, what?
Yeah,
they did a lot with the TV stuff in the American version. Like there were TVs all over the place with this turning on with the static and everything.
Yeah, and the girl that was with the cousin who's like in the mental hospital, she like doesn't like to look at the TVs, and when I don't remember his name in the American movie, Ryuji character, her ex-husband, when he's watching the tape and Naomi Watts goes out on the porch and she's like looking through everyone's windows that they're watching TV.
Yeah. Well, they were trying to play up the theme that actually was very. It wasn't very like super obvious, like that it was placed forward in this way of like this, fear of some kind of new technology.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. Is like it seemed too like on the nose with that in the American movie, where it's like, damn, people really be watching a lot of TV these days. It's like, okay, sure.
Yeah, and really when you think about it with the book, like I don't know when VHS like came out, but it must have been pretty new. New enough that in the book there's one point where at the end when he's like, uh-oh, my family's still gonna die. Mm-hmm. He's like calling her like, do your parents have a tape player? Is it VHS or Beta?
Oh yeah,
Beta, remember? So
do they have a new VHS player?
Yeah. So like there was still in the time where there was Betamax or whatever. And VHS. So it was even potentially scarier. And really they didn't continue on with it very much in descriptors in the book, but right at the beginning, in the description of like at the very beginning of the book, it's like describing the city and it's talking about it's very like industrial.
Oh yeah, it talks about a factory and everything.
Yeah, which I thought was like, it's kind of trying to set the scene of all this new technology and unnatural stuff. But then that didn't really end up being like a big motif or anything talked about throughout the book. It just kind of sets that as the beginning.
That's why it's so much better, in my opinion.
Because it doesn't hit you over the head with anything.
And I don't know, I loved it right from the beginning. It was like beautiful description of the factory and just the sea, and then but then it goes into the just really creepy stuff happening to the cousin. And and then just being more of a mystery than like hitting you over the head with the horror too. In that way it was a little different, and I think maybe I possibly rated it a little bit lower because of that also, because I had already seen two movies that were a little bit more geared toward horror, trying to be horror at that point, and then I'm reading the book and it's more of a mystery. So it, but I did like it, and I'm interested to read the sequels. Spiral is number 2, and then Loop. Yeah, I don't want to talk about it because I already read Spiral and finished it. So you can read that. I'll be reading Loop next.
And then I'd like to read those more so, but then probably maybe it's watch the Japanese versions of those. And I don't know if the American versions follow the books at all. They probably completely deviate, especially like they have a Ring 2, which I've not seen the second one. Which came out shortly after. I don't know when it came out, 2005 or something like that.
Yeah, like only a year after.
And then there was Rings. We just looked up that
2017,
came out in 2017, right? Which like completely off of my radar.
Yeah, I have no idea. I didn't even know there was a second one until last night when we were looking it up.
And that almost seems like it's almost could be like a reboot type of situation. They call it Rings instead of Ring 3, and we looked it up. It has like an 8% on Rotten Tomatoes with the critics, so it's like
probably not great. But yeah, I'd like to see the Japanese sequels and the American ones out of curiosity. Now, okay, I didn't really get into. I was just gonna say like my argument for why I think the book is so much better. And I'll say it for you this time, is why don't they just do it the way that it is in the book? Like, they have the book, they have the story. Why didn't they just use it for the
screenplay? Like, why did they change the things that they changed about it? I don't know. I mean, it's a different story. Like, in terms of anything surrounding Sadako Yamamura, it's different,
and then even like the little things we kind of already mentioned. Why make Asakawa a woman and then Ryuji's her ex-husband?
Yeah, that's kind of a weird...
And the father of the son?
Thing, yeah.
Why?
Like, you could make Asakawa a woman, but then have a husband and a kid instead of... And still have a friend, Ryuji. The Ryuji character in the book is a character.
Exactly. He's like a crazy character.
It's like a weird, and has this weird arch of like at the beginning he's just Asakawa is like he's thinking, we get the description as the reader that like you know, he's apparently supposedly by his own admission, like raped 3 women.
Yeah.
And I was actually, to me, I'm reading the book and I got to that part and I was like, why isn't Asakawa like more concerned with
absolutely,
this? He was
absolutely.
like not really worried about it.
He's like, it's not a big deal.
He might have done it, but you know, I'm not telling anybody. And he was still like his friend and everything. And it's like, that part was, that to me was like, this is a little bit weird.
For sure. But that sets up that he doesn't mind showing him the tape that he might die.
Yeah,
it
like, does. Yeah.
He's not a good person, and he's like this weird philosophy professor.
But here's the thing. It sets it up, but then his own admission for the reason for why he shows him the tape is not because he's potentially a rapist. It's because because Ryuji's thoughts about humanity is he would like to be...
he would like to witness
the end of humanity. And that's why he said that it's like somebody who thinks like that, who cares if they, you know, watch this video? But it's like, that's the thing. You know, I'm sure tons of people have that idea about like just like philosophical, like, I want to see everything end. That doesn't make somebody necessarily a bad person in my mind, as opposed to purportedly, you know, raping 3 women.
Yeah. So maybe, and it does seem more like about that he would help solve the mystery too.
Yeah.
More than
well, that's certainly his main justification for getting him in it. But then the whole rape situation comes back around when
you learn about Sadako's
Mai Takano, who is like who Asakawa thinks is Ryuji's like girlfriend,
the student.
Yeah. At the very end, she's like, no, like he like was basically, he was a virgin.
Yeah.
You know?
He was just playing
like
it up.
I believed him, and Asakawa was kind of like, oh, was he just playing it up? Maybe he never did any of that stuff, and he was just like, you know, and it kind of makes Ryuji's character a little bit like different, and makes it seem like more like a weird nuance. It's like a weird thing to brag about, to tell a lie about.
Yeah.
But it makes it sort of make a certain amount of sense, because he talks earlier in the book about that, right? Like, doesn't he? Like, if you were gonna die a virgin, wouldn't you want to? It's when they were talking about Sadako's death.
Yeah.
You know, about the fact that she was
raped by the doctor
by the doctor, and then thrown in the well. And Ryuji's like, well, maybe she wanted him to do that. Like, she made him do that.
Because she has the psychic power to make him do that.
And Asakawa was like, kind of like, well, why would somebody want that? And he's like, well, if you were a virgin, would you want to just have that, you know, be your last thing that you're thinking about? And then that adds up, to him being like, that's what, you know, he felt that way because he actually felt that way. That's how he felt, potentially, and that's why part of the reason probably why he called Mai when he's dying.
Yeah, he doesn't call Asakawa, even though you know that he figures something out. Yeah. He's like, oh, I know why she's still coming after me. I need to call someone, but he calls Mai instead. Yeah. Yep. See, so that adds so much more. Like, it doesn't add anything to make Ryuji Asakawa's ex-husband. Like, it adds nothing to the story. And it takes a lot away to make him not the character that he is in the book. Yeah. So I was confused by that. Although Hiroyuki Sanada is great in the character that he plays. Yeah, I just like him as an actor, so he was good in that. But yeah, my basic thesis is that either movie, they're good horror movies, but the book is a damn good book. You know, like, not for a certain genre, but just like a almost great book of like any category. The movies are good, like, just if you like horror. Yeah, and really the book being a mystery, and really the 2 movies having that mystery and them solving it, that kind of thing, is there in all 3 of them. But only in the book do they actually do like investigative work. You know, really, like them discovering everything was actually, they worked on it and figured out, you know, what the clues are and how to do it. There were so many things, and actually now, after like
I watched the Japanese film first, so it's like not as fresh in my mind as the book or the American movie now. But at least watching the American movie, it's like so many of the things they figured out, they just like stumbled upon them
In the Japanese movie?
in the American movie.
Oh, in the yeah. I mean,
And
that's my
I think
big
they
gripe
did
with
that in the
both
Japanese
movies.
movie too, right?
Yeah.
Is like those ones, they're just like this weird like psychic situation going on in them too, where they just they happen to stumble into these things because they kind of play it as Sadako wants them to solve this mystery, right? Because that's how it's played as. That makes sense because that's kind of.
But in the book, she doesn't have the power to just project the Shining into Ryuji's head, and like in the Japanese movie, he just when he like is helping the old guy up on the beach. He just like has a vision and sees the whole backstory, and it's like, okay, mystery's done. Yeah, because he just saw it in a vision. Yeah, she wouldn't need to make the tape if she could just put it in people's heads.
And that's the same as in the American movie. Every once in a while, Naomi Watts gets grabbed by the ghost arm and then sees a vision, you know, of something that happened, and that happened in The Well too when she gets grabbed, you know, again by this ghostly arm, and then sees her get killed and thrown in the well. You know.
Yeah, that's my biggest gripe with both the movies is like the tapes are less interesting than how the tapes described in the book. The clues are easier and they, like you said, they don't really follow the clues. They just see them and it is revealed to them along the way.
And it's really not about, in the movies, it's not about why this tape exists, how this tape exists from the point of view of Sadako who made it. In the book, it's like really like she projected this on here, and they get into all the psychic images and
what's
things
so
like
interesting about it in the book is when the description of how it goes black, you know, periodically, and then Ryuji figures out that it's her blinking.
And that's so only cool. In the reality scenes. There's reality scenes and there's abstract scenes, and the abstract ones are thoughts. Yeah, and it's like it's so much cooler because they do like explain all that stuff. It's like supernatural plus like something grounded in reality in that investigation of like figuring it all out.
That's what's like missing from the movies is like, it's a mystery, but it's also does feel like sci-fi in a way sometimes. Yeah. Because like thinking of like Sphere by Michael Crichton, it doesn't just brush past it. Yeah. It talks about how Ryuji's like counting the seconds between the blinks to find out that that's the rate at which an average female human blinks. Yeah.
And he doesn't get into it. But he starts to talk about like, oh no, I gotta brush up on my electromagnetic, waves on my broadcasting because I don't know anything about where a TV signal could come through to hijack this, So it does get into that kind of stuff, and even in the sense that really this videotape is like a virus is what we get to at the end of it. Really, he thought about it from the beginning as his hypothesis of what might have killed these teenagers is like some kind of virus, and then by the end he's like, oh yeah, it's some kind of this paranormal virus in this videotape that like you have to unless you want to die, you have to show it to somebody else. You make a copy and show it to somebody else.
Yeah, because it needs to mutate and like go to a new host, basically.
Which is really good, and they have that in the movies, right? Where the copy is what saves them, but they don't really.
They don't explain.
They don't add that extra like, what does that mean? Like they sort of do. They're like at least in the American one we just watched. He's like, well, what's going to happen to the next person or whatever, and it's like, so you get the idea that it's going to keep going.
But it's too easy the way they do it, especially in the Japanese movie when one of the symbols in the tape is somebody pointing. And then Asakawa sees it at the end pointing to the copy of the tape.
Oh, yeah.
Why would that be in the videotape that Sadako made?
Oh, that's true. I didn't even...
It doesn't make any sense.
That's where, that's the kind of things about the stuff in the movie, like almost predicting the future or, that kind of thing and leading them along in that way that really doesn't...
So it's like... it's not just that the blinking thing is cool in the tape, but it adds a lot of meaning to like that you're looking through Sadako's eyes and seeing her abstract thoughts. But also I feel like the movies, especially the Japanese movie, relied a little too much on kind of like jump scares. It would do like a creepy noise every time they see something. And didn't do that much for me.
Yeah, there's a lot more creepy just like stuff even that happens in the American one that kind of makes it a little bit better as you're going along, like in the mystery, even like the whole horse thing.
Oh yeah, the horse thing that they just totally add for the American movie is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, the horse on the boat scene's brutal.
The only thing they do, and yeah, that's what I mean. That part is like, oh, that's a very horror movie thing that they add. But then, in the American movie, they make Sadako like this demon child who's like, when they're interviewing her like at the psychiatric place, so they're like, you don't want to hurt anybody, right? And she's like, but I do, and I'm sorry, and it's like, well, no, I mean, in the book, she didn't want to. She was just a person, and society had wronged her in so many ways, her and her family. Yeah. She's not the one who killed her mother or her father. Basically, in the American movie, at least, I don't remember the Japanese one as well. She's like basically the direct cause of her mother's death. Which was after she killed her, obviously, though. But
I mean, that gets to even how Sadako is like wrongfully murdered in the movies is different in each of these, because in the book it's the doctor who's missing from both movies.
Yeah, the Japanese movie it's her father, right?
Yeah, her father killed her, just smacks her on the head, throws her in. In the American one, it's the mom that like thinks that she strangles her and then throws her in. But in the book it's neither of them, it's the doctor guy that her, throws her in there. Yeah,
and really that's just like the nail on the coffin of her wrongs, because in the book it's like society had wronged her father by not like believing him in all that stuff, just because she couldn't demonstrate her psychic power when she was
projecting an image onto a
test, or whatever. Like they didn't believe him, and he ended up dying, from that kind of thing. Her mom committed suicide by jumping into a volcano. And so she's like, society is just horrible, and I'm going to create this, manifest this virus to kill,
so she's
to get back at people. And it was that merge between her hatred and the it was a little kind of weird, but kind of cool in a way, that fact that the doctor had smallpox at the time and infected her, and that's the virus thing.
The virus plus her psychic powers creates her ability to project onto the tape. Yeah. That's why I'm saying, like, a little bit of sci-fi in there, too. Yeah. All right. Welcome back, those of you who skipped the spoiler sections. Let's get into our final recommendations. I can go first. I read the book first. I watched the American movie first. And then years later, read the book first and then watched the Japanese movie. My recommendation is to read the book first. I love the book, Ring, by Koji Suzuki. If somehow you haven't seen the Japanese movie or the American movie, hop on the opportunity to read the book first, because it's so much better. That's my recommendation.
My recommendation is exactly the same. I, again, watched the American movie first years ago, and then now watched the movie, and then I read the book. And I would still say, read the book first. Even reading the book last, I still gave, it's the third time I had come across that story, but I still gave it a 7.5, even
higher than both movies.
Higher than both movies, even knowing what the story was. Even if you watch them, read the book. But if you haven't watched them, for sure read the book. And then as far as the movies, you could watch the movies after that. At this point, if you haven't seen them, I don't know if you need to.
Yeah, I would say watch the movies if you're a horror movie fan.
Yeah.
And if you're a horror movie fan, how have you not seen Ring already? So, read the book. We agree on that.
Yeah.
All right, so let's average our score for the book and both movies to determine if they are underrated or overrated. Let's start with Suzuki's book here, Ring. I gave it a 8.9.
And I gave it a 7.5.
That averages out to an 8.2.
That's a very good score.
Very good score. And on Goodreads, it had a 7.62 converted to our scale. So definitely underrated.
Underrated book.
Yeah, book is underrated. Wow. By quite a bit. Full point. Or not a full point.
Yeah, and then the Japanese movie, I gave a 5.9.
I gave it a 6.4.
So that averages to a 6.15. Not bad, not great.
Bad, not
but
bad.
The critics gave it a 90, have it 97%, and the audience at 81. This is like very overrated.
Movie.
I think people just think classic, Japanese horror movie. You know, so they give it that kind of thing.
Be a retrospective.
But
score,
I'd say for the general viewing audience, very overrated. That's an overrated score. If you go and you search, Ring or Ringu on Rotten Tomatoes, and you find 97, 81, you're like, whoa, I gotta watch this. You don't have to watch it.
No.
If you're a big horror buff or a Japanese film buff, you can watch it.
Of course.
But otherwise,
97. What does he drive my car?
I know. Yeah, it is no Drive My Car. Well, you should watch Drive My Car. There's a lot in that. That's a very good movie. This is an okay movie.
Yeah, for a horror movie too. Okay, as for the American movie The Ring, what did you give it?
I give it a 6.9.
I gave it a 6.8.
So 6.85 right in there. Not bad. The critics have it at 71%, which pretty close to our score. That's I say that's pretty good.
Pretty spot on, maybe slightly over.
The audience has it at 48. What? That's confusing to both of us.
Underrated
here.
From the audience. I would have thought the audience would have liked it more. Honestly,
me too. I would have thought the critics would have. I wouldn't have been surprised if these were switched. If I looked it up and saw critics 48, audience 71, that would have made sense to me. Mm-hmm. I don't know why the critics like this movie so much. Honestly, I don't know. It doesn't seem like a movie. It seems like critics a lot of times will hammer a horror movie that might even be this iconic thing, but maybe they see it as that iconic idea. The idea of the videotape in the 7 days was so big that you should watch this movie.
It says a lot, and it does. I mean, it visually looks very good. It does,
yeah, and that adds to the fact that what I said about it holds up. It holds up pretty well for being a 20-year-old movie.
That's true. 20-year-old movie.
Yeah.
But underrated according to the general movie-going audience.
Yeah, and so we're not going to be comparing these to our other ratings because these ratings are not really official because we both had watched the American movie first. Yeah. We were spoiled as to the general story. Yeah. So these are not official scores.
Maybe we'll make a separate list of rankings for bonus episodes. Yeah. And that being said, if you have any ideas for something you want to see us talk about, book to movie adaptations, anything like that, let us know in the comments because, again, this episode was brought to you by Carlos Fontes, who gave us the recommendation. Thank you so much, Carlos. This one was really fun. I love the book, so thank you for the recommendation. Horror fans, I've got the perfect book recommendation for you. It is a book called Animal City, Cannibal World. It is a novel written by myself, Dillon Allen-Perez. If you like spooky, mysterious books, if you like The Ring, I think you'll like my book too. I highly recommend it. Go down to the link in the description to find where you can order yourself a copy. You'll also find the collections of poetry that Ryan and I have published down there in the description. So thank you for staying tuned with our videos. Follow us on Instagram. Subscribe here if you haven't already. All right, that's it. Happy Halloween, and back to the end of today's special bonus episode. All right, viewer, you tell me, which is better, the book or the movie?
Let us know in the comments below. Stay tuned by clicking the bell and subscribe to the channel.
And tell your friends to tune in too. Click another video now. Thank you.
Bye.